All right, so check this out. This is the X100VI, the Fujifilm X100VI. There's a lot of hype about this camera. It's sold out just about everywhere you go. You have to pre-order it to get your hands on it. And it's a pretty awesome camera, but I feel like there's almost too much hype over this camera. So I wanted to make a video talking about the positives and negatives from like a real world experience and give you guys my opinions on this camera. I've owned the X100V since it came out, and I upgraded the X100VI. So I'll give you my thoughts on this camera. So Louis, you gonna help out with the video today? Yeah? All right, so the first thing you want to look at with a camera is image quality. Is the image quality out of this thing good, great, amazing, crappy? What is it? So my personal opinion, I think the image quality on this is good. I wouldn't say it's great, maybe between good and great, but not great, not excellent, not incredible. I mean, you certainly can get really good images out of this camera, but in order to get those really cool images, what you really want is film simulations, and that sort of enhances your photo or the look of your photo, but we'll talk about that later. First, yeah, image quality. Image quality is good. Definitely not complaining. We have a nice lens on here. This is a 23mm lens on a full frame camera, like full frame equivalent. It's about a 35mm, which in my opinion, absolutely awesome. Fuji, you did a great job on that, because 35mm is kind of like a magical focal length. You can shoot upper body with it, you can shoot full body, and then you can shoot environmental portraits with the 35mm. So it's a fixed focal length, but it's kind of like a zoom lens. So that's pretty cool. And powering the X100VI is Fuji's brand new X-Trans 5 sensor, and it's a 40 megapixel sensor. And on APS-C, 40 megapixel is considered high resolution. And the thing I worried about when I pre-ordered this camera is this lens going to be able to resolve enough detail for that high resolution sensor? Because if you have a lens that doesn't resolve enough detail, all the imperfections in the lens really shine. So I gotta say, this lens is a great lens because you don't see those imperfections in the photos, so that's great. And Fuji's X-Trans sensors, some people swear by it, some people don't understand it, but the actual sensor is built differently. So the way it gathers light and gathers data is different. So the photos out of a Fuji camera just kind of look a little more organic, if that's a thing. But hey buddy, what's going on? How you doing? All right, and the last thing I want to talk about is shrinkage. Now, usually, guys, that's a bad thing, but when it comes to this camera, it's a great thing because we're dealing with a 40 megapixel high resolution sensor in here. And when you shrink things down for social media is like 1 or 2 megapixels when you shrink it down to 1080, right? So when you take 40 megapixels and shrink it down to social media size, everything tightens up, it cleans up, sharpens up, the noise kind of disappears, everything just cleans up and looks like a really, really good image. So yeah, shrinkage with this camera, definitely a good thing. All right, so the next 4 things I'm going to group together in one section called Retro Vibes, and basically we're going to talk about the design, the optical viewfinder or hybrid viewfinder, we're going to talk about the buttons and dials, and film simulations. So let's start with the design. I mean, just look at it. This is a nice retro looking camera. It's a very beautiful camera, and that's probably the big reason why it's selling so fast. Everyone wants to get their hands on something that looks like a piece of retro art. Next, we have this hybrid viewfinder. So it's an EVF, electronic viewfinder. You can turn that on if you want precise compositions and things like that, or you can turn on the optical viewfinder, which takes you right back to the 90s, the 80s, you know, those old disposable cameras where you wind, shoot the picture, wind, shoot the picture. It's that kind of viewfinder where nothing really lines up and you just kind of point the camera in the direction you want to shoot and you take your picture, and whatever you get, you get. So it's a really cool experience to shoot with an optical viewfinder with a digital camera, and that's something that's really unique to Fuji. And one of my favorite things about this camera are these tactile, you can hear them, buttons and dials on the outside. And it's so much fun shooting with this camera because you can change your ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture with the buttons and the dials on the outside. So for me, you know, being a photographer who started back in the film day, it's just a lot of fun to be able to dial in my settings by changing these little buttons and dials and things and just locking everything in and then taking a picture, and it just I don't know, it kind of slows down the whole process of photography and makes it more enjoyable, as opposed to your camera being in fully automatic and you just spraying and praying. And you can put this camera in full automatic if you want to. So yeah, you have those options. And one of the most exciting features and most sought after features with Fuji cameras are the film simulations. And you know what, I thought it was a gimmick at first. I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna really use them. I like using Lightroom, I like using Capture One. I'm not really gonna use the film simulations in the camera. And I was wrong. These film simulations are absolutely amazing. You can just set them up in camera, see live preview in your EVF and LCD of what the film simulation is gonna look like as you're shooting the photo or the video, which is super cool, by the way. And you just go and you shoot and you have fun, and your images have this retro styling to them, which is really unique. And the one thing I did learn about film simulations, which I absolutely love, is that you don't have to edit your photos after. So you take your photos with the film sims, they come out of the camera looking great. They're JPEGs, you send them off to the clients, you post them on social media, and you don't have to spend time sitting in front of a computer editing your photos. Like, they look good right out of camera. And you know what? If you can save time, you're saving money. And this camera's probably paid itself off for me just in terms of film simulations and saving me that time in editing. All right, video shoot got postponed because it started raining, snowing, and it got real dark, but I did get some cool shots in the city in the rain and the snow, which I will be featuring in this video, so stay tuned for that. But first, I want to talk about some built-in features, the built-in flash and built-in ND. All right, so let's talk about the built-in flash. Usually, you know, cheaper cameras, entry-level cameras have those little pop-up flashes and whatever, and you're like, whatever, doesn't really matter because I'm going to use a real flash. But the flash on the X100VI and the X100V, absolutely amazing. I use it all the time as a fill flash. And the really cool thing here is that the lens has a built-in leaf shutter. And I don't know if you know this, but leaf shutters can actuate a lot faster than regular shutters. So you can sync this flash at a super high speed. So let's say you're shooting, I don't know, midday, sunlight is coming down on your model, you got the raccoon eyes, you can sync this at a really high speed, and then the flash power coming from the camera relative to the power of the sun, factoring in the speed of that leaf shutter, allows you to overpower the sun with the little onboard flash. So that's a cool little feature. I don't know, a lot of people don't know that advanced trick. It's a little flash trick. Maybe I'll make a video about that. If you want to know more about it, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll make a tutorial. And how did you get out? Huh? How did you get out? Oh, you crazy little dog. So what do you think? Huh? Do you want to talk about ND filters? Huh? Do you know anything about ND filters? Huh? Huh? What can you tell me about ND filters? How did you get out? Crazy dog. Okay, so let's talk about ND filters. So what do ND filters do? Well, I'll show you. I have one here on the DJI Pocket 3. You can see right now, everything is super bright. You can't see anything. When we put the ND filter on, boom, there we go. So an ND filter, it cuts the amount of light coming through the lens to the sensor, which allows you to shoot in brighter environments with a more open aperture. So rather than, let's say, dropping the aperture on the X100VI down to f8 so you can shoot in the bright light, you can just put an ND filter on the camera, which allows you to stay at f2, and you get that nice shallow depth of field. So it's an artistic thing, but usually ND filters are only found on high-end cinema cameras. In this case, we have a nice pocketable camera with an ND filter. So that's so cool, and it comes in so handy, especially if you're shooting on the street, taking portraits and things like that. I wish all cameras had a built-in ND filter. For me personally, this makes this camera so usable because now I don't have to carry a filter in my pocket. I just have a built-in ND filter, so that's awesome. And if you're into flash photography, definitely try this. Drop the ND filter on the X100 camera and then increase your flash power to +1 and take some shots. You're gonna get nice punchy shots with the highlights being nice and bright and then the shadows nice and dark. And then use Across and change the S-curve so your darks get even darker and your lights get even lighter, and you're welcome. You're gonna love the way that looks. All right, so let's talk about one of the major downsides to this camera, and that is the autofocus. The autofocus is just leaves a lot to be desired, especially if you're using continuous autofocus. Even if you're buying this, that's what happens when you're close to an airport. All right, no more jets. All right, so here's the thing. The continuous autofocus on the X100V and X100VI, pretty much unusable. Well, I mean, it kind of works, but if you're doing a paid gig and you need your focus to be bang on with every shot, then you can't trust it. So is it usable? Not really, because you can't trust it, right? So if you're shooting, let's say kids, you know, birthday party or something, your kid's running around and you got the continuous autofocus on, it's gonna get some shots in focus, some shots are gonna miss, and you're gonna be disappointed. Last summer, I shot a backyard wedding, a nice small backyard wedding with the X100V, and it was absolutely awesome. And I had the camera set to single shot, and I was just composing my shots, taking the shot, compose the shot, take the shot. And I wasn't trying to do anything fancy with bride and groom walking down the aisle. Everything was posed and set up because I didn't want to get blurry shots, and then you give the client images and they're blurry, and it's just like, oh, well, my camera wasn't good enough, and it just makes you look like a fool, right? So you got to know the limits of your camera, and the continuous autofocus is definitely a limit. But I will say, for that wedding, I absolutely loved shooting with the film simulations because I took the JPEGs out of the camera, I gave them to the client, I got paid, and see you later. That was it. Super easy, super simple, didn't have to spend hours editing. So that's a huge plus with Fuji cameras. But yeah, autofocus definitely isn't their strong suit. All right, so one of the nice features with the X100VI is that you have good video capabilities. You can shoot 4K 24, the camera is image stabilized, so you can get some nice steady footage. This is cinematic brilliance right here. Best cinema ever.
Now let's check out that deke in instant replay.
Oh yeah. Although I'm not going to tout this as one of the major features of the X100VI because it's not really a good video camera. It's just in a pinch you can use it for some video. It doesn't have a fully articulating screen, so you can't really vlog with it. You need some adapters in order to hook up a mic, so it's not ideal. But if you're already shooting with Fuji cameras and you have the Fuji cameras as your main cameras, you can use the X100VI as a B-roll cam, and it's going to look flawless. All right, so now I'm going to talk about something that's both a positive and a negative. Over the years, I've talked to a lot of people, and some people call this a negative, some people call it a positive, so I'm going to give you both sides of the story. And the negative is the fact that you're stuck at 35 millimeters. So this is a fixed focal length lens on the front, and you're stuck at 35. However, you can add different screw-on attachments. Fuji makes a TCL and WCL, the TCL being a 50 millimeter equivalent, so you can go from 35 to 50 millimeter, which is a slight jump in length. And the WCL is a 28 millimeter equivalent. So the 35 to 28 isn't really a big jump. I wish it was a 20 millimeter, and I wish the longer TCL was a 75 millimeter because that would really give you some more dynamic shots. But that's the negative. People say, oh, I'm stuck at the same focal length all the time. It's boring, blah, blah, blah. Negative. Personally, I fall on the other side of the fence. I think it's a positive because as a photographer, you have to work on your composition skills. You have to learn how to see photos. So like I said earlier, 35 millimeters is good for headshots, full body shots, environmental portraits. So you can do a lot of things with the 35 millimeter, and it forces you to kind of move around. And you look for the right composition, the right exposure, the right setup, the right background, all that kind of stuff. So as a photographer, it gets you moving, it gets you thinking. So it kind of helps you grow and develop your skills as a photographer. So I'm gonna chalk it up as a positive. All right, and for those of you who like to personalize your gear, the one cool thing about the X100 series of cameras is you can buy accessories for the cameras, video about it there, and you can accessorize this thing and personalize it so it looks just how you want it to look. And that's kind of cool for those of you who like to be individuals and kind of make things your own. All right, so the autofocus for me is pretty much the only gripe with this camera. That's the only big negative in terms of like everyday use and that kind of thing. There's other things you can complain about, but those are so minor, it's not even worth talking about. It's just the autofocus for me. I wish that was better. Fuji has got to go to phase auto detect and get on the same level as everybody else. That would be amazing. In terms of like this camera, as a camera, do I love it? Absolutely. I love having a portable camera with this kind of quality. Just put it in my pocket and go and shoot and don't have to worry about it. I got my film simulations, I got my ND filter. I can use it for professional work, especially if it's like social media content creation. Like, I absolutely love this camera for that kind of thing. If I'm shooting thumbnails for YouTube or products for Instagram or something like that, just, you know, you pull it out, you start shooting, you have your film simulations, everything looks good. You offload your Bluetooth, whatever, to your camera, computer, and then you can tighten up the images a little bit if you want, but for the most part, they're good right out of camera, and you send them off and you're done, and the project's done, and it just makes things so easy. I absolutely love this camera, and right now I'm on vacation, visiting some family, have the camera in my pocket, can take it out, shoot this, shoot that, shoot whatever, don't have to worry, and it's nice. It's a nice camera to have. Although I will say the silver one does attract a lot more attention than the black one, so that's something to consider. If you have any questions about the camera, leave it down below, and thank you for watching. This video is over, and I will see you guys in the next video.